Everyone. Now I get a little nervous, so could everybody move 2 seats back? No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Um, Thank you for being here. Um, I can take no credit for what we're going to talk about tonight. Everything on these slides, except maybe the last slide, I take some what do they call that? Some creative privilege, perhaps, with some of my thoughts. But everything else came from Thought and Life, which is a book that was dictated by the Spirit Emmanuel, by the hand of the medium um, Francisco Xavier. No, I'm sorry. Devaldo Franco, excuse me. And then the Gospel according to Spiritism, chapters 25 and 27. So let's get started. I like to call Will the reading from Happy Life. It's amazing how they're always tied to the topic in a lot of ways. And that reading tonight was perfect. But I don't like to call things problems. I like to call them opportunities, challenges, all right? Opportunities for growth. And for me personally, I think will is my biggest opportunity. I've educated myself in a lot of ways on some of the things we talk about. I do my best to practice them on a regular basis. I fall short frequently. So will is the biggest part for me to try to grow and get better and better each day. And this chapter in Thought and Life is amazing how it resonated with me, because it really ties the significance of the will to our overall being. So let's jump in. There's a couple definitions from the dictionary. A lot of times when we talk about will, people think about free will, right? And free will is definitely a part of it. Free will is there, it's real, it exists, it's very important. It does dictate our ability to choose and consequences of our choices. But will specifically, as it pertains to this talk and as it pertains to everyday life, is our brain's ability, our ability to use our brain and our thoughts to control our actions on a daily basis. Not so much the bigger topic of free will, but using our will to control. What's the definition, right? Choosing our own actions, right? To have a strong or weak will. So when I speak of will as an opportunity to grow, it means I want to do my best to increase my willpower, if you will, or my desire to control the actions that I take. In chapter 2 of Thought and Life, they describe the mind as the human mirror of awakened consciousness. So as you're looking in the mirror, right, if you think about your brain, it's our awakened conscious. We stimulate it with things that we read, with things that we watch, with things that we're exposed to, and it determines how we make decisions, and therefore it is the mirror of our consciousness. And they compare it in the chapter here to think of your mind as a large office building, right, or a big company that's divided into different departments, right? You think about finance, you think about sales, you think about marketing, you think about HR, right, in a business. But they talk about different departments of us, right? Department of desire. And what do they tell us? That the Department of desire, right, desire is purpose and aspiration that stimulates us to activity. So from our desire, we have our purpose in life, right? We kind of define that out of our desire. And our aspiration, what are our goals? What do we aspire to? And that creates activity. Then they talk about the Department of Intelligence. And it's through our intelligence that we expand our evolutionary process, right? Our growth as a spirit, as an individual entity. And we develop our cultural assets. Remember, as we evolve one life to the next, all these intelligent things that we pick up, our growth intellectually and intelligently, stays with the spirit. It doesn't depart, right? It's not a material gain that leaves us like the skin and bone when we perish, right? The intellect stays with us. So that's a big piece of our overall being. And then it talks about two other departments, right? The Department of Imagination, right, which is huge, right? We use our imagination. We create these. We have ideals of how things are supposed to be, right? And our imagination helps us take those ideals and the vision of that and grow our overall being. And then, of course, the memory, right? The Department of Memory, as they call it. It's where all of our experiences are archived, right? We draw on those memories, good or bad, positively or negatively, to impact us on a daily basis. And they explained that, the list could go on and on. We could probably list 20 other departments in this thing called the spirit, or the body, or our life, right? But they kind of narrowed down to those four. And then Emmanuel, as he always does, kind of ties it together. And he says the most important piece of all this, right? These are different departments. They're all very important. They all play an active role. But the most important, he says, right, is will. And he calls it the cabinet of will. And he equates the will to a manager, if you will. What's he say here? The will is the enlightened and vigilant manager that supervises all sectors of our mental activities, like a luminous aura. So if our will is disciplined, if our will is strong, if our will is consistent, we have a much clearer, much cleaner aura and presence. If our will is not so diligent, not so consistent, then obviously our overall aura is a little less clear. But ultimately, it's our will, he says, is the most important, the cabinet of will, and that's what we have to be vigilant about.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
So, in spiritism, you mentioned that the intellect is supposed to go with you. Your intellect carries on in the next life. I mean, what about neurological disorders? I mean, what if in one life you are afflicted with some kind of neurological disorder? I mean, that's going to affect your intellect, right? I mean, I don't know how spiritism
Well,
those sort of.
yeah, that's a very good question, and the way I would answer that is think about not this life, but last life, 2 lifetimes ago, 3 lifetimes ago. Let's say you used your intellect in an inappropriate way to harm others as opposed to help. In this life, as you develop these conditions based on actions you took in previous lives, the core of your spirit, right, that is not living in this body, that's intact, but it's impaired in the sense that you can't use it in this life. Doesn't mean it's gone, but you've established a condition in which it's taken away from you, or it's not taken away, but you've limited your use of it. Does that make sense? There's a great story, and I can't quote the source, but it's about a surgeon in the life that they're describing in this book, right? Where in this life he's a gifted surgeon saving lives, but through his examination of life between lives, where he's preparing for a new life, you see all this stuff. We don't see it now. Luckily, fortunately, we have a forgetfulness of the past, right? We don't walk around in this life remembering all the things that we perhaps did poorly in previous lives. But this gifted surgeon, many lifetimes ago, was actually a warrior, right, with a sword. He used his hands to kill, right? And through his evolvement, he's now saving lives with his hands. Does that kind of answer your question?
Well, yeah. I mean, and you say it could go the opposite way, where it could impair where the intellect is still there, but it's not.
Can't function, not accessible, yeah. There's a problem with the hardware and software. What do they call it in computers? I don't know. Thank you. I knew somebody here knew what they were talking about. So Emmanuel goes on to describe the will as the helm, in the sense that, when you think of a boat or a ship and you've got the helm with the captain's, there's a lot of press about that now. We've got some ships that are running into ships, and admirals are being terminated and things like that. So if you think about the helm as the control center, right, for driving forces that are incorporated in our knowledge, he describes electricity, right, in our spirit, in our being, is dynamic energy. I think of that as the central nervous system, right? Since you mentioned it, right? Central nervous system, the energy, the electricity of the body. Magnetism is static. When you get a pass, you kind of feel that, right? That static energy at times. And then thought is an electromagnetic force. Your thought goes out into the world. It creates you taking actions, you doing things with impact others dramatically in a lot of times. And he tells us that when you join these things together, thought, electricity, and magnetism in the grand scheme of things, what he calls universal life, we create affinity, assimilation, and dissimulation. And that's used by our spirit to evolve. These different forces within us come together. It creates what we're attracted to. It creates what repulses us. It creates the ability to assimilate with different people, with different thoughts, and it ties it all together. And through the combination of these things, we make choices or we don't make choices, right? We do one thing instead of another. We think certain things, we don't think other things, and our spirit evolves as a result of those choices taken. And furthermore, he goes on to say that will is the decisive factor. Not the only factor, but ultimately the decisive factor. Because will decides the movement or the inertia of the machine. Momentum is really important in so many different facets of not just physics, but life. As you make movements, as you make choices, you're creating this flow, right? You're moving in one direction or the other. You can change that in a split second with decisions, or you continue building on that and increase your momentum. So he describes the brain as a dynamo that's generating mental energy according to its own capacity. What does that mean, own capacity? We all have a brain, right? But we all have different capacities. Hey, honey, how you doing? I didn't see her walk in. I'm sorry. We all have our own capacity, right? We've developed to where we are individually, starting in the same place, but to the level of our capacity in this life, we are utilizing this brain to generate this energy. And within the will, we have the control to direct mental energy in one direction or the other. So all of us have different backgrounds, different experiences. We all are in different places of development. We choose with our will, right, to direct that energy in whichever direction we go. Some days are better than others. Some days some weeks we string 7 days of greatness together and we have a bad day, but we choose and we direct that energy, not in this fatalistic type predetermined fate. We create our own destiny. And this establishes causes, he says. These causes will determine the problems of our destiny. So our tomorrows, right? What do we call that typically? What do you think? Cause and effect, yeah? We make a decision or we don't make a decision, we experience the effect. All of us right now are living the effect, right, of things we chose earlier in this life and previous lives. Our socioeconomic status is one of those things, supposedly, right, that we determine before we come back into a new life. Overall health, right? Perhaps that example you gave, right, of a central nervous system disorder. We knew we needed to learn something to grow, so we create this capacity or this incapacity of certain function so that we have to deal with the consequences of that. And the choices we're making now, in addition to dealing with the previous causes, we're creating future effects each and every moment, each and every thought. Emmanuel goes on to tell us that without the will, desire, so our passions, our aspirations, the things that, why we get up in the morning, the things that drive us, if we don't pay attention to the will, if we don't try to discipline our will, that desire may err and go astray, creating debts. Instead of using our passion or our aspirations for the good of others or for quality things, we may make bad choices and hurt people in our pursuit of our desires. So that's an example of how the will can be controlled or not. And not just creating issues today, but as it says here, requiring centuries of suffering and restitution, yeah? Things that we do today impact not only us in this moment, but for lifetimes to come. Another example he gives is with our brains, right? We talked about each of us using our own capacity, but think about all of the intelligent people out there that use it for criminality, yeah? They make wonderful Ponzi schemes. They devise systems to gain at other people's loss, right? So there's a lot of. I had a patient the other day shared a story with me. He was in a 7-Eleven or a Circle K, frantically trying to buy gift cards, right? He had to buy gift cards, and he was on the cell phone. And luckily, the guy behind him told him, "Hey, I think you're being scammed." All right, and the guy put down the phone, didn't hang up, but he put down the phone, and he said, "What do you mean?" He said, "What's going on?" Right? And he describes, "Well, this guy called me. He says I didn't pay my taxes. I didn't file on time, and they said if I don't get them $2,000, I'm going to be fined another $4,000, and I might go to jail. So I got to get these gift cards and cash, and I got to take it to this guy, right? So 92-year-old guy, really old guy, right? Who, nice guy, smart guy, but kind of confused, right? Panicking because some guy who knows, maybe that's a bad example because maybe he's not so smart, but maybe he is smart, but he's using his intelligence, his gift of gab or his gift of persuasiveness to manipulate a 92-year-old man. The world is filled with examples like that. But thankfully, it was interrupted. It was stopped because someone chose to use their intelligence to help someone instead of hurt. Another example is imagination may create monsters of darkness. And this one concerns me because I have young daughters, yeah? And one of my daughters came home one day with these crazy drawings of what I would call witches or demonic-looking things. And come to find out, it's a popular doll, high school something or other, horror monster house or something. It's like, oh my goodness. So her imagination is being influenced by these things, yeah? So have to be diligent to control our imagination and use it towards the light as opposed to darkness. And then memory obviously can fall into neglect and inefficiency. As we live our lives, if you ever hear two versions of a story, right? I tell you there's three. There's my version, your version, and the truth, right? Because we're all biased to some degree on reality. So we can manipulate our memories, we can manipulate the facts to serve our selfish interests, or we can use them to help everyone, to bring people together as opposed to fight for just what we think is best for us. Does that make sense? Yeah? Awesome. Only the will is sufficiently strong, Emmanuel tells us, to sustain the harmony of the Spirit. In other words, our spirit, to stay in harmony, takes work. It's not perhaps at a natural state of harmony. We're not pure spirits. We're not at that point where we've evolved beyond ties to material needs. We are not always consumed in love. We still have facets of us that are tied to greed or selfishness or personal gain. Not that we're bad in the sense that that's all we do, but we still are very much tied to material things. So we probably wouldn't be on earth if we were more elevated. But he tells us, he stresses that although will is required, right, the use of our will positively to maintain the harmony of spirit, that the will cannot stop mental reflections when produced by contact with others. And that, I had to read that a couple times. So you're doing your best. You're determined. Your will is strong. You're reading, you're studying, you're praying, you're coming here, you're doing other things to help others. But one day you walk in to a place where you're meeting some friends for work maybe, or maybe you were invited to a party, a friend of a friend, and you walk into an environment that is reminiscent of things maybe you did earlier in life, or things that maybe your spirit are attuned to. Whatever that vice might be, whatever that thought might be, very quickly you can go from being diligent to being tempted, right? And going back to your old ways. For me, one of my last vices that I'm really trying hard to work on is food. I'm doing really good, yeah? Thank you. It's a problem for me. I don't drink anymore. I don't do drugs. I'm not really doing terrible things in excess like that, like I did when I was younger. But my wife, who I just said hello to, right? She's wonderful. She helps me, right? We're worried about my cholesterol. We're worried about my heart. I'm 50 years old. I know I don't look it, but I'm 50 years old now, right? So my wonderful wife, every night now, we make these. I eat it. She makes it. Yeah. She takes organic vegetables and different things, and she puts it into this crock pot, right? So in the morning, I have this lunch bag filled with organic vegetarian meals, and they're delicious, and they're filling, and they're sustaining, right? And I'm great as long as I focus on that. I'm fine. But then somebody comes in and there's a lunch and they got pastries and they got sandwiches or they got pizza. If I don't touch it, I'm strong. But if I eat one piece, I got to have 3 or 4, right? Because I subject myself to that temptation and I indulge, and then I lose control. So I'm sorry, honey, I didn't do that today. I was very good. I was. But that's, but that's an example of my challenge. Yeah? We all have challenges like that. Yours may be different than mine, but we all face these temptations. So the point here is, regardless of what our weaknesses or our temptation or our opportunities for growth, if we can impose disciplinary control over these elements, right, it helps us maintain cohesively in the service of goodness. So in other words, if we have tendencies to go the wrong way, if we can control our will, if we can be strong and build up defenses that prevent us from crossing that line, we're going to do much better. But we all have these. We're human. We have these things that we have to overcome. Or am I the only one? No? Okay. I feel better. What he tells us here in chapter 2 is that will is that piece that imposes disciplinary control. With our will, we can control our desire, right? If we're strong, if we dedicate ourselves, we can control our desire. I may love pizza, right? But I can control that desire, right? I can. I have to just try harder, right? We can also control with our intelligence the choices we make with our intelligence. We can choose to use our intelligence to help others and do good, or we can try to scam that 92-year-old, right, and do bad. I was really very pleased in part of my work today, because I work with older people, and you hear stories on how other providers that help them do things. And I had made some decisions for him over the last couple of weeks trying to help him. And it all worked out, because sometimes when you do the right thing, they may not need you anymore, right? They may not need your services, right? Which really, that's how it's supposed to be. But when you make your living, right, on services, you need people that need your services. But I'm always very pleased as I grow and evolve how you see these things that they faced with other people and how you corrected them and didn't take the easy road, if you know what I mean. So using my intelligence, using your intelligence for good is always the best choice, even if it might hurt you materially in the process. Not physically, but when you help others, even though it may not be the best for your business or your work, but you help people, and you made the right choice. That's a great use of your intelligence. Imagination, right? We talked about that. Using your imagination to create good things, to create positive things. And then obviously controlling the use of your memory, making sure that you recall things and use those memories positively as opposed to altering them for your gain. And this is a great sentence, I think. It says in chapter 2 that God conceded will to reason after the being laboriously traversed through the dark regions of instinct on its multi-millennial journey. That sounds like a pretty intense statement, but all it really means, right, is wherever we are in life right now, in this sequential lifetimes, right? Let's go to the next slide. All it means is when we were way down here on the bottom left of this graph, simple and lacking knowledge, we were driven by what? Instinct. Right? Animal instinct, right? Just like my dog. My dog does certain things because of instinct, right? We were driven by instinct. As we progress up this spiritual evolution, our instinct is given away to reason. Once we have spent lots of time, lots of experiences growing and evolving. That's all that sentence means. Ultimately, at some point, getting to that level of a pure spirit, where our whole being is love. Our whole being, our whole existence is based on service and charity and helping others. But it all started for all of us at creation of being very simple and lacking knowledge. So how do we progress? Enough about chapter 2. Let's jump into the gospel according to Spiritism. Chapters 25 and 27. How do we progress? And what they teach us here is, first and foremost, it takes work, right? You reap what you sow. If you help yourself, heaven will help you, is a common verse, right, from the Bible. The law of labor. You have to work. You have to try to help yourself. And that's tied into the law of progress. If you don't do absolutely anything, right, to help yourself, Are you going to forever be stuck in that graph towards the bottom or wherever we are now? No, right? You're going to grow. You're going to go slowly, right? Progress is inevitable. But the more you help yourself, the more you progress, or the faster you progress. Seek and you shall find is another example of, you have to work, you reap what you sow. You have to look to improve. And some of us are amazing at that. And then there's guys like me that hit their head over there, hits their head, against the wall sometimes, doing the same things over and over. But we all have the ability to flip the switch and start to work. And if we work, we're going to produce. There's no doubt about it. If we try, we are going to succeed. And obviously, that last sentence is very important, right? And we talk about this all the time. We become the children of our deeds. That's another way of saying cause and effect, another way of saying you reap what you sow. Whatever we do today impacts us tomorrow, and each moment turns into the next. We are the sum total of all of our experiences and all of our choices to this point. So, in the gospel, they talk about humans are always the creators of their own fate. We've touched on that several times tonight. By making better choices or making less bad choices, that's a good question. If I don't try to make good choices, but I don't make any bad choices, is that just as good as trying to make making better choices? That didn't come out right, did it? So not doing bad is a wonderful thing, but it takes more than that. You got to do good, right? You can't go live on an island and not be exposed to anything negative, and not do anything bad because you don't have any temptation, and expect to grow as fast as you will if you actually are in a situation where you have to do good or where you can do good. So you can shorten your punishment or prolong it, right? Happiness is definitely tied to our willingness to do good. Is doing good hard? Sometimes, right? Is doing good always the best thing? Absolutely. But do you have to move a mountain? Do you have to give millions of dollars to charity? Do you have to feed 1,000 homeless people? No, right? Every opportunity. I just watched a movie over the weekend, and I forget the name of it. For goodness sakes, what was it? Miracles from Heaven, right? It's a little girl that has. Did you guys watch? Right? A lot of you watched that here, I think. She's got terrible abdominal issues, gastric stomach problems, right? She's gonna die. And then at the end of this movie, as it's, I won't ruin it for you, but at the end of this movie, it's showing these little couple seconds of every piece in the movie where like a little miracle happened, right? So if we can find any opportunity to do good, it may seem like nothing. Maybe it's just opening the door for someone. Maybe it's praying for the guy, even though you don't have any cash and you can't give the guy $5 who's hungry, right? Say a prayer for him, right? Hope he finds better tomorrows, right? Just little things, and you string enough of those together, and you're doing good constantly, which is wonderful. And they say here that the guilty and unhappy spirit can always save itself. That's the most beautiful piece on that slide. No matter where we are right now, we may be at the lowest of lows in our lives, facing illness, facing homelessness, facing no job, or just have no desire to go on. We've lost whatever it might be to drive us, right? But at any moment, we flip the switch and we say, you know what? It doesn't have to be like this. God has created the opportunity for me to use my free will and my will on a daily basis to grow and evolve. So we just have to persevere and never give up, yeah? Never give up. So in the gospel, in chapter 25, it talks about our lack of willingness, strength, and courage, right? They tell us that that's the most common deterrence to stagnation, the most common deterrence to not growing or not being happy, right? And that our happiness depends on our willingness to do good. So if we can increase our willingness to help, if we can strengthen our fight against temptation, if we can increase our courage to never give up, ultimately we're going to do more good and we're going to be happier and grow. So how does that tie in to this whole concept, right? We know right now, where are we right now? We're in the body, yeah? Some people, some spirits equate that to prison, right? The spirit is free, meant to be free, right? When you close your eyes at night and you're asleep, your spirit is free, not tied to your body, right? It is tied to the perispirit. That kind of is always connected to the body. But in our body, the spirit is forced to kind of be tied and imprisoned. The choices that we make walking in this body, living in this life, and as well as all of our lives, impact the perispirit, which is tied to the spirit. That spirit, right? That eternal being, the real life, the real us, right? That eternal creation of God, right? Our spirit, prior to this life, what do you think happened, right? At some point, we recuperated from the previous life. We relived all the wrongs, all the rights. We got mental and physical healing from our mentors, in the spirit world. We educated ourselves, and by the grace of God, right, we were given an opportunity to come back. And before we came back, we made a plan. We decided a lot of things, right? We needed to work on X, Y, Z. Do you think you made an easy plan in the spirit world? Because if you ask me right now about, everybody talks about planning. You got to have a 1-year plan, a 5-year plan. Where are you going to be in 5 years? They always ask you. I ask people when I'm interviewing them, right? Do you think people necessarily make a really hard plan for themselves? You think, well, in this life, as humans, I think we do. I think sometimes we'll set the goal a little bit lower so we can achieve, right? And not everybody, but I think if you read psychology, literature, and stuff, we make more progress sometimes with smaller goals. But in the spirit world, when we're preparing for what's the goal in the spirit world? What are we planning for? We're trying to get to that pure spirit, right? That's a lofty goal. So we probably make really hard goals for ourselves before we reincarnate, super hard goals. And then we're born with no memory of anything we did wrong before and no memory of why we came here, except that in our conscience, right, ingrained in us, we know right from wrong. We know that there's a mission there. But we have to find our way. So the body makes all these choices, right? The mind, we live our lives, we make our choices. And the whole idea is to make better choices and to grow through those things. But at each successive life, the body perishes. We're back in probably some disarray, right, initially, facing uncertainty. We're probably scared. We're reliving some of the things we didn't do right. And then we make another plan. In each life, one after the other, the body on earth interacts through the perispirit that's connected to the spirit, imprinting all of those choices on that spirit, and eventually evolving and becoming more and more good, more and more pure. So we only got, another hour, right? I'm kidding. What's the best way to strengthen our will? What do you think? I'll take comments from the floor. There's got to be at least 10 things we can do, but what do you think the most important thing is? Practice, that's huge. That's a big one. Not the one I'm looking for, but it's really good. The one I'm looking for starts with a P. Knowledge is huge. No, right? So we want to get more knowledge. I'm looking for one that starts with a P, not practice. Give Alex the prize, right? Prayer. But all those are good. I mean, the knowledge, practice, right? Courage, right? But what they tell us, right, in the gospel, is prayer is your best way to strengthen your will and to progress. Because what happens when we pray? It inspires a willingness to improve, right? It's hard not to be optimistic and desiring to do better when you calm down and pray, yeah? There's very few times I can think of praying where I was more sad or more negative than when I started praying, yeah? So it inspires willingness. It lifts us up. It encourages us. More importantly, or just as importantly, I should say, it draws good intentioned spirits toward us. If I'm depressed and I'm down and I go to the bar and drink 12 beers, right? Am I drawing good energy towards me? Oh, I'm drawing a lot of negative energy towards me, right? But if I pray positive thoughts and I ask for help and I ask for guidance, I'm bringing positive stuff towards me. Did you have a question?
No, it's kind of as if humans already don't like to ask. So
Okay,
putting that wall down.
I get that. Yeah, that's good.
In a way, it kind of goes together.
I like that. I think that makes a lot of sense. You're exposing yourself. You're acknowledging some deficiencies, and you're asking not necessarily for help in the sense of, let's say you're coming up short on the rent. You're not praying for money necessarily. You're praying for strength. You're praying for courage to get through it. You're trying to find opportunities, and that's one of the things they talk about here shortly. But thank you very much. It definitely gives us enlightenment, or can give us enlightenment, to become instruments to carry out God's law of love and charity. So as we're elevating our energy, as we're drawing positive spirits towards us, those positive spirits are making suggestions to us. Yeah, they're, hey, Al, maybe you should do this, right? Johnny, maybe you should do that. That doesn't mean they guide us. They don't pull our strings. But if we get our energy in tune with positive spirits, we're going to receive all of that good energy and those good ideas. There's a story in this part of the gospel that talks about a guy that's lost in the desert, right? And he stops and he prays, and he has this idea. I should go up to that higher ground and look around. Maybe I'll find a river or water, right? And he finds the water, and he lives, and everything's fine. But the comparison, or the point in the gospel is, now when he came down off of that and he found the river, he could have said, what a great idea I had. I'm so smart, right? As opposed to he prayed, he asked for help, and he got inspired on following a better path. So do you take credit for it? Do you think you did it all on your own? Or do you think that prayer and that aligning yourself with positive energy really helps you connect to maybe some inspiration from above? So if prayer is real important, and it's probably the best way to strengthen our will and to grow, how should we pray? And here's some direction for us, all right? When you want to pray, they tell us, don't make a show of it. Seek privacy. In other words, don't just pray out loud to impress everybody, right? Look at me. I'm a God-loving, perfect, example. Just, it's a private thing. Don't get me wrong. We say group prayers. There's nothing wrong with that, but it shouldn't be a show. Don't worry about the length of your prayer. I have 3 little girls, and one of them will pray for 8, 9, 10 minutes. You just keep going and going and going. It's beautiful. It's actually really cute. She throws everybody in there, and sometimes she says amen, and then she says, "Oh, I forgot," right? And she adds another. It's adorable. But don't worry about the length of your prayer. Be sincere. Pray from the heart. Be humble when you pray, and forgive others. One of the directions they suggest is, if you're angry, if you've got any issues with people in the world, as you start your prayer, you should forgive them. First, get rid of all your anger. Get rid of all your animosity towards people in your life that may be a problem, so that you can be more tied to charity. You want to get everything out of you that's contrary to charity when you pray. The effectiveness of prayer, they tell us, is best when we really believe that what we're praying for is going to happen. What do we call that? Trust in God, yeah? Now, that doesn't mean, how many of you prayed for the winning lottery numbers yesterday? Right? That doesn't mean just because you pray for winning lottery numbers, we're not talking about material things. What we're really praying for is strength, for courage, for assistance to get through a rough patch, right? And if you really believe, guess what? It really strengthens the effectiveness of prayer. Believe that God's going to not grant you the winning lottery numbers, but he's going to help you find a way to get through your financial challenges, that he's going to help you find courage, patience, and resignation to accept the situation as it is and to find solutions. Also, they tell us it's important that we believe that God will provide us with the means to help ourselves. We've talked about that. With the assistance of ideas suggested to us by good spirits. When you pray and get peaceful and raise your energy, you're going to be more receptive to receive those positive messages. And obviously, God's going to help those who help themselves. You can pray for miracles. You can pray for the winning lottery numbers, but it involves some work. You got to help yourself. So just hoping for a miracle is not necessarily the most effective. They go on to tell us that prayer is an invocation, and by means of prayer, we're communicating with whatever entity we're praying to. That could be someone that's gone before us. It could be God. It could be any number of things, right? But when we pray, it's kind of a direct line of communication where we are invoking a request, right, or an acknowledgement of some kind to whoever we're praying for or to. So think of it that way. You're opening a line of communication via thought. And thought is obviously powerful. Our problems, they go on to tell us, can be divided into two groups. One of those groups are problems we can't avoid. I would put those in the categories of things you decided before you came back in this reincarnation that you're going to go through. You kind of set those in motion in a lot of ways. Maybe you can't avoid those, right? And then there's another file, right, that things that you can control, right? Problems we cause ourselves through carelessness and excesses. What list do you think is longer for each of us? Any idea? The things we can control, what's that?
What you can control.
Absolutely. Huge list, right? And that's what they tell us. In fact, he kind of says, hey, it should be obvious, right? That humans are the authors of most of their afflictions. He also points out that it should also be obvious that humans could save themselves from their problems if they always acted with wisdom and prudence. Does anybody disagree with that? What's the best way to increase wisdom and prudence, you think? What's that? I can't hear you. Okay, that's one. Any others? It's on the bottom. Right? Less ego and pride. And this is my 2 cents. I'm convinced that 98% of our problems are caused by our ego and our pride. If we can reduce the influence of that on our decisions and our interactions with others, I think we'd be much happier and much more peaceful. So that is my 2 cents. But they tell us act with wisdom and prudence. And then how do we achieve this is pretty much the final question. Well, they instruct us to place a limit on material ambition, right? Because if we do that, if we limit our material ambition, we wouldn't fear material ruin, right? How many of us chase material gain and are fearful of losing what we've acquired? I've been there a couple times in my life. I've been way up here and I've been broke a couple times. What I found is the best way is when I'm not chasing money, life is a whole lot easier. Whole lot easier. Because if I'm chasing it, it's like there's never enough. So that's one recommendation. Then they tell us reach for spiritual growth and the fear of material downfall is reduced. If you're spending more of your time trying to elevate your spirit as opposed to material gain, you're not going to be as scared. Be humble and reduce the impact of hurt pride. If you're humble, right, just because somebody calls you an idiot doesn't hurt you, right? If somebody slanders you, we're not going to hurt you as much. If you don't have yourself up on this lofty pedestal of pride and ego, there's really no way to fall as much, right? Because you're not holding yourself up there. And by practicing the law of charity, you're going to reduce all these things, right? Slander, envy, jealousy, quarrels, and dissension. Not only of the impact of others doing that to you, but your ability to do that to others. You're not going to slander others. You're not going to be envious of others. You're going to avoid quarrels because you are focused on being more charitable. So that's the last question, and this is the last slide, all right? And this is my 2 cents as well. This isn't from the gospel per se. This is me paraphrasing a lot of different stuff I've read over time. I'm convinced that early Christians, they were called, before there was such a thing as Christianity, right? Early Christians, the apostles after Christ was crucified, they were called followers of the way because they taught others the lessons of Christ and they tried to live the way he instructed them to live. Spiritism teaches us that very thing. You won't see crucifixes, even though we're Christian, right? We believe in Christ, right? We celebrate, we emulate as best we can the way he lived. The lessons are in the way he lived, not in the way he died. But the choices he made, the things he said, the things he did, the ongoing, I mean, it's over 2,000 years, right, since he hasn't walked the earth, and his message lives on. So we truly teach that the way Christ lived is the best example for all of us. And if we can emulate him more and more on a daily basis, we are going to be at peace, we're going to be evolving, and we're going to help others. So I thank you for your time and attention, and we're going to move on to the last part of our meeting. I'm going to play a guided meditation so we can kind of set the mood. Feel free to meditate, pray, just relax so that you can receive passes.